Hey, Poppy. Okay, are we ready? Hi, and welcome back to my channel, Yarn at the Bottom. My name is Manon, and I'm a programmer, horsey girl, and a knitter, and it's of course the knitting that we talk about on this channel. There's Archie. Archie, you're not quite on the screen. You want to come a bit higher? He's just come back from a walk, so once again, might be tired, might disappear off the screen in a bit. I'll try to keep him in view for all the Archie fans out there. For today, I've been nerding quite a bit in the last few weeks, so I keep track of all the yarn that I buy in a spreadsheet, like how much it costs, etc. And then also keep track of all the projects that I have on my needles, when I start them, how much yarn I use for them, and when I finish them. And all of that data can be combined into quite a lot of Excel sheets, which is what I've been doing for a few weeks now. On days off, it started as I just wanted to see like whether there was a pattern in how much yarn I would buy across the year. But it got a bit out of hand, so now I have a lot of charts, and it's sort of like a basis to talk about how much I've bought, which, spoiler alert, is too much, and how much of that I have been able to knit during this year. What would I do differently for next year? What am I going to do differently for next year? And so basically lessons from that. So it's a reflection for me, end of the year. So it's a good moment to look back, like what have I done? What have I done? And what do I want to do differently for next year? And yeah, I also wonder if other people do this as well. So let me know in the comments if you do something similar as well. I've got lots of notes. I don't just use spreadsheets, I write down lots of things. And now, of course, the page doesn't turn, but there's quite a bit that I want to talk to you about. But we're going to do the main talking based on the nerdy spreadsheets. So let's just start at the beginning. The first chart is a chart about just very simple. There's no magic here. It's just what orders have I placed during the year and for how much. And if I've placed more than one order on that day, they compound on various days during the year. And it's not like there's not necessarily a trend. It is for most of the year, it's sort of average. And then if you zoom in a bit, you see that towards the end of the year, that is like a third of the chart is stuff I bought in November and a bit in December. So towards the end of the year, and it's not even Black Friday, so that's the worst part. It's not that I saw a really big sale and I was like, yes, gonna go for it, or like lots of sales, which is something that I had thought early in the year, like, oh, don't buy too much yarn. We'll buy it, when it's Black Friday or when there's like a big discount. That's when I'll get sweater quantities of yarn. That's not what I did. I just bought lots of yarn during the year. And then towards the end of the year, so most of the buying happened when I was in Munich visiting my brother, but then we went to a yarn shop, and I tend to stay away from yarn shops for very good reasons. And yeah, I went a little bit crazy. Some of it was a birthday sweater, so birthday yarn. I was going to get from both my parents and from my husband. So some of that expense was planned. Some of it, of course, was not. I knew I was going to spend a bit more money than just for that one jumper project I have for my birthday. There was quite a bit more. Something that happened as well during this time is that Knitting for Olive had their big donation it's not a sale, but the weekend where everything that you would order, all of the money would go to children in Gaza. So there's some of that, and in fact, we're going to see that. So let's move to the next chart, and this is all the orders over 2025, but where I ordered from. So either a yarn shop. If I bought it in a yarn shop, it's just that yarn shop, but lots of it is orders online. And you can definitely see that I had already bought, I think, a sweater quantity and a bit more from Knitting for Live. And then the big Gaza donation came around. And so, yes, I spent a lot of money at Knitting for Live. What I'm quite happy to see is if you look at this, I mean, you might not recognize all the different names, but there's quite a few from hand dye. There's 2 hand dyers that I bought directly from, so they didn't have to lose any profits to shops. And what I also notice is that I didn't buy, or when you look at this chart, it looks like I didn't buy that much from very big resellers, like a big corporation like Hobbii, for example. Linda Hobby is also something like that. It's just a very big business. Quite a few of these purchases happened directly at the dyer, directly at the manufacturer. So Knitting for Live, the Rerum Natura are 2 examples of that, or at smaller yarn shops. It's also, I didn't just buy all the yarn from one yarn shop. There's quite a few in there. Also because, and we'll see that in a minute, I tried lots of different yarn. So, or I bought lots of different yarn, and not every yarn shop has every type of yarn that I wanted to try. So I had to order at different places, which I think is nice when it's little yarn shops. However, we go to the next chart, and here I've categorized the different yarn shops that I ordered from or bought directly from into big is for a big corporation, YS is like a yarn shop, so a small yarn shop. MAN is for manufacturer, so directly from the manufacturer, not through a yarn shop from the manufacturer, so directly on the Knitting for Live website, directly on the Rerum Natura website. And then dyer is just a hand dyer directly. And then when I saw this, I was a bit disappointed. I was like, oh, I thought I bought a lot more from little yarn shops. Turns out I've ordered lots from big corporations. And so I was a bit disappointed. When I looked at the previous graph, I thought I was doing really well. And then I looked at this one, I was like, maybe not so much. So yeah, that was a little bit disappointing. Also, I'm not going to tell you how much I spent until the end of the video when we get to conclusions and how much of that I've actually knitted up. So yeah, you'll have to wait until we get there. But yeah, this one made me think like, okay, I want to change certain things in here, and of course there are some brands that I can't get or that I haven't found easily at a small yarn shop, and also bigger yarn shops or like the big corporations will have lots of different brands, so it's easier to say, oh, I want Ann Sanders garn and drops and something else. And so for example, Linda Hobby will have all of those, so it's easier to just order all in one place and then have no shipping costs, because the big corporations can afford to not bill you extra shipping costs. But a small yarn shop might not be able to do that. However, that's all about choices on whether you want to put your money and do you want to support a small business like a one-person show maybe, or a big corporation that is faceless and you don't necessarily know if that money is going to something good. Anyway, that is very personal. And from all of this, so on this chart, you already see I spent lots of money on buying yarn this year. So this is all only 2025. my last order was from yesterday because I realized for one of my projects that I want to start early next year, I didn't have enough yarn, or it was going to be very, very close. And I really don't like to play yarn chicken. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But if we look at all the skeins that I bought versus the ones that I used, it's pretty bad. So I bought a total of 303 skeins. So that could be like balls of 25 grams for mohair, for example. That could be like 50 grams for fingering or DK, whatever. Or skeins of 100 grams if it's worsted, or it's like the hand-dyed skeins. So I didn't look per grams because I didn't keep track of how many grams I bought. In what I did knit up, I did, but not for everything I bought. I might try to do that for next year. But yeah, that is a lot of stuff I bought and didn't use. We'll get into why some of that happens, but most of it is just I buy lots of stuff thinking I'll be able to knit it all, and I don't have that much time. I mean, I have a full-time job. I have 2 horses of my own, one of which I've started to train since the summer. So that's my baby horse, but he's 3.5 now, so it's slowly starting. But that means I have to actually put time into not just cuddling him, but also starting to train him. And then I take care of 2 other horses, one that I actually ride 3 times a week and do competitions with, and my best friend's horse, who is sort of the pensioner. So just gets to chill around, and I look after her and I ride her like once a week. So all of those separately are not a lot of work. Oh, and the first one is my pony, who I don't ride, but I look after. But put all of those together, and that's a lot of time. So every day after work, I go to the stables. And whatever is left after that, I can knit. And during the weekends, of course, I have some time during the day. And during traveling, when going to the office, I do knit as well. But it's not nearly as much time as I would want to have. Whenever I have a proper day off where I don't go to the stables and I spend a lot of time knitting, I'm always surprised at how much I get done. And I do think to myself sometimes, like, oh, what would happen if I didn't have the horses? I would get so much knitting done. I'll also be miserable because I love the horses, but yeah, I don't have that much time, to be honest. And I also make these videos, which cost me about like 8 hours a week on average. So sometimes it's a bit faster, sometimes it's a bit longer. And that's a choice, and I really enjoy doing this. But that is time I can't spend knitting while I talk about knitting. So yeah, maybe I needed to think about that a little bit better before buying all of this yarn that I don't have time to knit. To just look at the numbers, out of the 303 skeins, balls, whatever I bought, I only used 50. So that is a ball I will start in a project and knit. And I don't have any projects I didn't. Well, no, I have some unfinished projects, but I am actively knitting on. So that will be finished at some point. So there's no skeins in here that I started and then just put aside. Not all of these skeins will necessarily be finished. Most of them will be, but at the end of a project, the last skein might be, I don't know, half of it left over, but I still count it as a full one. So that's also going to be something. What do I do with all the like leftover skeins? I'm going to have to find a project for leftovers. Archie, you are on my notebook snoring, and I do need to read because it's a lot of charts and I need to remember what I need to do in what order. So now that we've seen everything I bought and how little I've used, because let's be honest, 50 skeins out of 303 is not a lot. I mean, to be exact, it's 16.5%. 16.5%. I mean, what is wrong with me? A lot, but this is one of the many things. But we go towards towards patterns, not quite. But out of the 50 skeins that I've used, what were they from and how much did I use in what project? And so I made this chart, which is like every different color is a different yarn brand, and that is the yarn I used in here. So what I find quite interesting here is that there's quite a lot of the like salmon pink, which is Hobie, and I didn't buy that much Hobie. So two of these projects, the Moby sweater and the champagne cardigan, which have a lot of, how should I say, a lot of yarn in them, that was all from Stash. So I also had a stash before this. I only started knitting like knitting patterns as of this year, 2025. Before that, I was freehanding stuff with not great results, hence turning to patterns. But I had already bought quite a bit of yarn, and most of it from Hobie. So I had quite a lot of just the very simple, the Friends wool, which is like a DK wool. And this is the champagne cardigan, by the way. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that Hobie doesn't publish anything about how it produces yarn, where it comes from. I mean, is it ethically responsible, or there's not much about that. They will tell you where it's from, but it's not always. They don't certify it to be mulesing free, for example. There's none of the care for like, are people getting paid fairly during the process of manufacturing this wool? And once again, this is a bit of I'm in a position financially that I can afford the wool that has that certification. And so I want to, but I didn't become aware of this until I think it's like May or June, if not even July this year. So there's a whole period where I didn't even really realize there was such a thing, which might be a bit naive maybe, but that's just where I was at. And once I realized that, I really tried to change that. So it doesn't mean I stopped ordering completely from Hobie, for example, for little gift knits. I still ordered a bit of yarn from there, but I've been a lot more mindful of that. Quite a lot of Hobie. And then for drops, I've used Drops Mohair quite a bit. So that is the drops that you are seeing in here. A decent amount of knitting 4-leaf, but I thought that was going to be a lot more because I had planned to knit at least one more jumper in knitting 4-leaf, but that plan got sort of pushed into next year. Then there's one big block of the Rerum Natura, that is my Highland sweater, which I don't have with me now. It's at home and I still need to block it, so I can show it to you in next week's episode for like the knitting update. What I find really surprising, and I had not expected at all, is how little Sandnes Garn I would have used this year. I've only used some in the Agnete cardigan, which is not finished, by the way. So that's why it looks like it's very, very small. That will increase. I think like on not quite half. I'm a bit under half. I think a third is not quite enough, but yeah, somewhere in between a third and half. So I've got quite a bit more to do on that pattern. But yeah, so I've got quite a bit more yarn in stash that is dedicated to this pattern. But I've not used it yet. I've not started knitting up the next balls, so I've not put it into this thing yet. But yeah, I was very surprised about that. And then a little bit from hand dyed yarns, from hand dyers. There's some Tout le Matin, which I'm using for my Orchid Bloom pullover. There's a tiny bit for the solarium hat that I knitted, and then there's a little bit for a project I casted on yesterday, which is not good for my stats, to be clear, because now it looks like I finished less. So I could have waited, but I was like, no, I need to start it because it's a gift knit. It's my last gift knit. That's not quite true, but last little gift knit of the year that has a deadline for sort of Christmas. Past Christmas, thankfully, because I'm not celebrating Christmas until a few days after with my parents and my little brother, and it's a hat for my little brother. So in terms of hand dyed yarn, Once again, the Orchid Bloom pullover, not finished yet, so that will increase a little bit more. The hipster hat is just going to be one skein. I don't have more than one skein of that yarn, so this is it. Other than that, not massively surprised by the rest of it. The main surprise was the very small amount of Sadness Gone. That is going to change for next year because I bought lots of it. And I think it's 3 or 4 sweaters that I want to knit with Sadness Gone yarn. Not 100%, but at least part of Sadness Gone yarn for next year. And yes, that's yarn I've already bought this year. Then from here we move to patterns that I've bought. And I've just ranked them from which designers. So in this pie chart, you see how many I've bought. So I bought or got, so this is a little bit weird. I bought 17 patterns or got 17 patterns. I've also counted the patterns that I knitted that were free. And I've also counted one pattern that I sort of self-drafted. So in total, 18 patterns. And I kind of like that it's not all from 1 or 2 designers. There's quite a lot of variety there. You can definitely tell that, well, either I like Petite Knit or I'm a beginner, and both are true. This was my first year knitting from patterns. This is really not comfortable, Archie. And I think Petite Knit is an excellent designer to start with. There is debate about like the size inclusivity of her patterns in terms of like how well they fit. But I had, with the very little experience I had with knitting patterns and the knitting community, it was sort of one of the first designers I came across, and her patterns are just very, very clear. I'm quite happy with the result as well for all of the ones that I've knitted. One of the patterns that I've not finished is from Petite Knit, but it's a hat, so I'm not expected to be disappointed much. The rest of them, very happy with. I made some mistakes, but we'll talk about that in a different video when we review those patterns. I want to make a like everything I knit in 2025 video at some point in the next few weeks. But yeah, overall, very happy. So I stand behind this. Few patterns from Unwind Knitwear as well. I mean, is it obvious that I have a little bit of a designer crush? I mean, I think what she does, what Rachel does, is just really beautiful and amazing. Other than that, lots of different patterns that I've not all knitted, but I've really appreciated seeing different style of patterns. Some that are very, very verbose, some that are very, very cryptic is not the right word, but you have to have seen other knitting patterns before you do those. So yeah, but it's been good to have a variety of them anyway. And then in all of the 18, there's only 5 of those that I've not started. 13 of those I have started, and only 3 of those I've not finished. Oh, I'm sort of giving away the next chart. Well, there we go. We can move on to the next one. Out of the 13 that I have started, 3 of them are not finished, and one is the Ignite cardigan, the other one is your Orchid Bloom pullover, and then the third one is the Hipster Hats by Petite Knit that I've just started yesterday. So of course it's not finished because I started yesterday evening. So yeah, when I look at those numbers, the patterns started or not started, I'm like, okay, it's not terrible, but I would prefer in the future to maybe wait a little bit longer. So out of those 5 that I've not started, there's 2 that I want to start even 1st of January basically. Probably, I mean, it's cheating a little bit with these numbers, but maybe end of December already. So there's 2 that are about to be knit. And then in that context, it's not too bad then. There's just a few that I have not knitted up. And what happened is a designer that I've been following on Instagram, for example, or YouTube, would come out with would put a new pattern out that I thought was fantastic, and it would have like a discount code, and I would think, let's get it now because I want to knit this pattern. And then the time wasn't quite right to start knitting it at that moment, and so it got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and that's the few patterns that I have not knitted. It's just out of lack of time, not because I don't like the patterns. Do I still want to knit those patterns? There's one that I'm not sure I will, because I would need to get, I think, other yarn, and I don't know, I'm not but that's just one out of 18, so I don't think it's too bad. We can make mistakes, right? Out of the ones that I have started, carrying 3 over to the next year, I think it's not too bad. 2 are very big projects, well, very big. The Orchid Bloom pullover has lots of lace on the yoke. That was a very big project to start. I thought the other day that I was done with the stockinette on the body, and then I measured it, and I need to do like 5 to 7 centimeters more just stockinette rounds. So still doing that. And then the Agnete cardigan is brioche, and that is just taking forever. And it's not something that I pick up if I have a choice of other projects as well. So I sort of force myself 1 day a week to just knit on that. But so it's slow. So I'm not surprised that one is carried over. And then the hipster hat, I've only just started, so of course it's not finished yet. So overall, I don't mind. I think these numbers are pretty good. Also, I have to say, the patterns finished before the end of the year, I might be able to finish the hat, or I need to. I've got 6 days, including today, to finish it and gift it before my brother goes back to Germany. So yeah, bit of a tight deadline, but that should be finished before the end of the year, and so these numbers should improve before the end of the year. But since I'm recording this video today is the 24th of December, I can't tell you if I will have finished it or not, so it just counts at what it is today. And then when we look at the next chart, this is how much the patterns that I've bought have cost me. And so you can see that for some of them, there's no cost. And one is a test knit, so I got the pattern for free. The Patronus mittens was a free pattern, is a free pattern. You can get it on Ravelry. And what is called the Remco hat is the hat that I made for my colleague, and I just eyeballed the pattern. I looked at what the gauge was for the yarn and what needles I was going to use, and just, yeah, made a hat. For every other pattern, it's all, I mean, okay, the first few ones are petite knit patterns, so the price is very, very, well, it's the same for all of them. However, the hipster hat, the last one, is also a petite knit pattern, but because that counts as an accessory, like a small accessory, that one is a bit cheaper. What is funny is that I also knitted the honey bucket bag from Petite Knit. It's my second pattern knit. That was a gift for my best friend's birthday. Most of the time he's adorable. Once in a while he remembers that he's a dog and that he thinks he's a guard dog. He's not. Absolutely, he's just the worst guard dog ever. He's scared if someone comes in the house. Okay, little gremlin, do you want to join again? Yeah? Come on. Okay, Archie will join back in a while. Possibly when... lovely. When I ignore him. That always works. Anyway, I was talking about the cost of patterns. Yeah, I think what I see is that in general for accessories the price is a little bit lower, and then for garments it goes a little bit higher up. I didn't buy any super expensive patterns. I'm quite happy when I look at the patterns that are a bit more expensive. So the first bump we see is the Amy Slipover. That is a pattern book, and I've only knitted one pattern out of that book, so I've counted the entire book. but that has like 10 patterns or something in it. So that is a very small bump for 10 patterns, really. And then the two sort of bumps towards the end of the year, that's for the Spots Regular and the Winter Sole Sweater. Those are very extensive patterns. I can't tell you exactly how many pages they have, but they have very clear charts and explanation of different sizes and different charts for different sizes, at least in the case of the Winter Sole Sweater. The Spot Regular has different versions, so different sizing in how you do the increases, for example. So I'm not mad about them being a little bit more expensive than, for example, the Petite Knit patterns. I'm pretty happy about this. The one thing I will say is that I thought I didn't spend that much money on patterns this year. If you had asked me beforehand, like, okay, quick fire question, how much have you spent on patterns this year? I would have said something like 50 euros. I spent a bit over double that. I spent 103 euros and 38 cents. I did not expect that. That is much more than I thought. And it's, when I'll tell you how much I spent on yarn, this is absolutely fine. But I was surprised. And so the sort of little mental note for myself is, do I need to buy patterns in advance of starting to knit them, or in advance of gauge swatching for them? Really? I mean, it's sometimes you can gauge swatch without buying the pattern if it's like a standard stitch, but if you need to do like a certain motif, like in color work, or what's it called, um, a texture, like with cables or anything, that becomes a lot harder to do without having bought a pattern. So that's the reason that I have bought certain patterns without knitting them straight after, is that I want to be able to gauge swatch so I could order the right yarn for it, or I had part of the yarn in stash or a similar yarn but not the color I wanted to do it in, etc. So yeah, did I buy any patterns knowing I was not going to knit it straight away? Not really. Not intentionally, at least. But yeah, I think this can be improved as well. And then the next chart is a total cost per pattern, including the pattern price and the yarn that I've used for it up until now. I don't know if you can call it a trend. It goes a little bit up, and then for summer patterns or accessories, it's quite low. And then my most expensive finished project is the Highland sweater, which, yes, I did splurge on the Riru Natura. I really wanted to try that yarn. So yes, I really went for it, and that was quite expensive. That's my most expensive finished object up until now, which, well, I've seen other YouTubers, and I'm sure you have too, knit stuff that is, or that can be quite a bit more expensive than this. So overall, I think it's not too bad. Like my average is like hovering around the 50 euro mark. I think for a garment, that's really not bad. I mean, keep in mind, quite a few of these have been knitted in Hobie yarn that partly I had in stash, and that brings the cost down quite a bit. The darker columns are things I've not finished yet. So, at least for the Agnete cardigan and the Orchid Bloom pullover, those costs will keep going up. And I have a feeling the Orchid Bloom will possibly, or get very, very close to the Highland sweater. The Agnete cardigan, I don't think it will get that high, but there's a lot more to knit on it. The hipster hat, I only have one skein. I don't have more than that. This is the price it's gonna be. The lighter ones are just the patterns I didn't start knitting, so there's no yarn cost on top of those. So one note I have on this is that next year this is going to look very different. I started with the cheaper yarn, which I think is not a bad idea. Like, start with, get to know what you like, and then start splurging. It's not advice. This is just more what I did. But once you know a bit more what you like, And if you have the budget, I think it's nice to go for a nice yarn that's going to feel really, really soft, or whatever feeling you want to have out of it. And it's what I've done. So I got quite a bit of, well, not quite a bit, but I got some hand-dyed yarn, which was definitely like a luxury purchase. I've got quite a bit of like knitting for live, Rerum Natura, of course. Yarn that is not cheap, let's be very honest. It's not cheap at all. But that I'm very much enjoying knitting. I mean, the Orchid Bloom pullover is Tôt le Matin yarn that is, I think, 80% or 70% merino, 20% silk, and 10% cashmere. And it's a dream to knit on. It's so, so nice. So it's not just for the finished garment, it's also for your enjoyment while you knit the project. And so I think this chart is going to look very different next year. I think the price of every individual garment is going to be quite a bit higher. But I think for first year knitting, I'm very happy with the average price of the garments I've made. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be what the future is going to look like. I want to say unfortunately, but no, that's a very conscious choice. And then we get to a nice one, and it's how much time every project spent on my needles. And this is a little bit painful. So overall, I'm quite happy. What you sort of can see is that it doesn't really depend if it's a very big garment or a very, or like yes, the small accessories took less time, of course. But two things: at what gauge is it knit? If it's a small gauge, it takes more time. So the Amy slipover, for example, it doesn't even have sleeves, but it's knit flat, and it's a relatively small gauge. So that took more than 10 weeks. And then also, if it has a very tight deadline. So, for example, the honey bucket bag, I started, I think I had still 2 months until my best friend's birthday. So I had lots of time. So I knit very, well, I wouldn't say very slowly, but relatively slowly on it. Okay, it's also like a brioche honeycomb, so it's not super fast. But still, for a small accessory, it took quite a bit of time. And then some of the sweaters, cardigans went really fast. And yeah, there's the obvious, the elephant in the room is the Agneed cardigan. That is my longest project, and it's still on the needles. It's not anywhere near being finished. The Orchid Bloom is also taking quite a bit of time, but I mean, full lace yoke and small gauge again. This is fingering with a very thin mohair on 3.5mm needles. It's not quick. But the Agneed cardigan is just by far, I mean, I can also show you, I've made a Gantt chart. I told you I was a nerd. And here you can see that I started the year being fairly monogamous. So you see that I start with the Moby sweater, and then when that, in the week that is finished, I start the honey bucket bag. And then halfway through that, I'm like, oh, I can do something else in the meantime. And then I start that. And then bit by bit, I start doing more and more at the same time. And that just slows everything down. Let's just be honest. That's what happens. If you knit 2-3 things at the same time, and I try to keep it to 3 and not, I mean, if it's a small gift knit, I'm allowed to do an extra 1/4 project. But it slows everything down. Whereas if I would just focus on one thing, just knit one thing, it would be much, much faster. The reason that I did switch that is, well, first I wanted to see, I wasn't unhappy being a monogamous knitter, but I wanted to see, like, do I like having more than one thing on the needles? And I quickly realized I do, because then I can have something fairly simple, stockinette, that I can knit in the car or while I'm watching a film that I do actually want to pay attention to, like a lot. And then something that will really engage me sew something with cables or with lace, and that I find really interesting, and I really have to focus, so I can't do that while watching a film that I want to watch, and really paying attention to it. um, and then the third one is something that can hover a little bit in between. So for example, the Ignite cardigan, it's brioche, so I have to pay a little bit of attention because it's not as mindless as stockinette, but it's also not super hard. And yeah, a little gift knit as well on the side is nice because that is just like little dopamine kicks that it's going to be finished within a week, maybe 2 weeks, and it's nice. It's also been nice to try color work like that, so that can also be swatching. So I will also start swatching for the next project I want to do before finishing the previous one, and then it's like a quick little, I don't know, I talked about that with Nat from Tink and Frog Knits on YouTube. If you don't know her, please check out her channel. I love her. She's really funny and she's so down to earth. I love it. But we're talking about that. Some people hate watching, but I really love it. It's like it's a little pre-taste of what the project is going to be like. So especially if it's like an interesting motif in color work or the pattern with like lots of cables, and you get a little bit of a taste for what it's going to be like and what the yarn is going to do. And I really enjoy it. I really also don't mind trying something on certain needles and then realizing, okay, it's not quite right. Let me try like the same thing, but on other needles or a different color. Or it's fun, or I find it really fun. So yeah, I don't know what it is about people that really don't enjoy the swatching. Maybe it feels like you can't start yet, but then I would say start swatching like quite a bit before you're going to cast it on, so that it's not blocking you from casting it on. It's sort of like a little sneak peek into what you're going to cast on next week, for example, and that way it makes it really fun. Anyway, back to the chart. I've got one more. So the last chart is something that was sort of the last drop that made me realize, first of all, I spend lots of money on yarn, and how much projects did I spend yarn on that I haven't even started knitting? And this made it very visual. And so this is every project or pattern that I want to knit. I haven't always bought the pattern for these, but I've either bought the pattern or I've bought the yarn for it. And some of these I've finished. So all the green, columns, the light green ones, are patterns that I have knitted and finished. And so the column height is how much yarn I've actually used for that one. The pink one is how much yarn I got for that project. There's a very clear trend if you look at the patterns that have two columns, is that I buy way too much yarn. I am very afraid of yarn chicken. I do not want to play it. This is my hobby. I don't want any stress involved in this, but it means that I most of the time get an extra skein because, well, I've got sort of a good reason. One, I've got quite long arms, and I don't want. I mean, if I want a sweater with like arms that are just or sleeves that are just a little bit too short, I can just walk into any store and buy a sweater there. One of my reasons for knitting is that I can make it in a way that is perfect, that will fit my body exactly as I want it. And so most of my sleeves I knit a bit longer than in the pattern. It's not a huge difference. It depends on the pattern. Certain sleeves I've knitted quite a bit longer, or others it's a very small difference. But in order to account for that, and then sometimes I do the body a little bit longer as well, I almost always get at least an extra skein of yarn. And if it's something with mohair as well, then it's at least two skeins of yarn, if not more. I mean, with mohair it goes a long way, so that only just get one extra ball usually. But what you can see in this chart is that, at least for the ones that are finished, Some I managed to exactly hit the amount of skeins that was suggested in the pattern, and so when I've trusted the patterns, I've never had any bad surprises. But there's plenty I didn't trust, and so that's a little bit of a thing. Where I'm like, maybe I should be more trusting of the patterns. And at one point, that's going to bite me in the butt. That will happen if I do trust patterns. I've also been quite careful. I mean, you can see a few. The dark green ones I've not finished, so they're not. You can't really say whether that's going to be enough or too much, or we don't know. I think the Agnete cardigan is gonna. I know I bought too much yarn for that, thinking I wanted to make the sleeves quite a bit longer. But I think I didn't. I definitely bought too much yarn for that because I'm not going to make them much longer. I want to. It's going to be quite close to what the pattern is. For the Orchid Bloom pullover, it was hand dyed yarn, and I knew that if I wanted it to, I could not run out of yarn because then that's it. Then you need to order a new skein. There's a new dye lot, and that is just not going to work. Or you're going to see a stripe, and okay, not an option. So I bought a whole extra hand dyed skein for that. So almost certainly that will be too much as well. And I'm not going to knit that sweater extra long. I'm going to make the sleeves fit me, but I'm not going to make the body any longer. I mean, as I said before, I thought I was almost done with the body and I could start the ribbing very soon, but I need to do like 5 to 7 centimeters extra. So I'm not anywhere close to. The pattern is supposed to be for more yarn. So yeah, that is not going to be correct either. But on the other hand, I had heard that sometimes Sari Nordland's patterns don't. Well, the yarn that people will end up using is quite different from what she says in the pattern because a lot of her pattern testers are only required to do the yoke and one sleeve for the test, and so you don't have the yarn usage for an entire garment. And so she would just put her yarn usage in there, and she knits relatively loosely, so it's not always very representative of what it will be. So I really wanted to be on the safe side of that one. Highland Sweater, it was a test knit. Once again, didn't want to run out of yarn. Not hand-dyed yarn, so it wouldn't have been the hugest problem, but still would have been annoying. And I wanted to err on the side of caution, and so I got more yarn than I knew I would need, just to be safe, because once again, longer sleeves. But I ended up using less yarn than what it said at the start of the test. I don't know if she has changed it later on or not in the pattern that was published a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, that was once again me being terrified of playing Yarn Chicken, and so I got lots and lots more. Other things in there, no, I think that's mostly it. At least the important ones. There's a pattern I'm going to knit again, and that is the Champagne cardigan, so what I'm wearing at the moment. And I'm going to knit one for my mum. And so for the yarn I've bought, I've actually looked at what I used, and that's what I've ordered. Because I'm going to knit her a size smaller than this one, because this is, even for me, it's a bit too big, and my mum is quite a bit smaller than me. So I do learn from my mistakes, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I think I might have bought just a little bit too much mohair for that one, but we'll see. And then the next thing that is really obvious from this chart is I've got a lot of yarn for other projects I've not even started yet. And they're not exactly cheap projects either. I mean, look at that. That is ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, the most expensive of those, the Zero Sweater, I didn't buy more yarn than it said in the pattern, because the pattern of the Zero Sweater is by Morika Knit. is already quite oversized. It has quite long sleeves, and I think I will just do whatever the pattern says to do. And I also bought the suggested yarn from the pattern, which is Lamana yarns, which is something I wanted to try for quite a bit. And I thought this was the perfect opportunity. This is my birthday sweater. So I technically didn't pay for this. Thankfully, because I mean, it's almost 200 euros in yarn. I find that quite expensive for one garment. I say that, and then when I look at my horse riding gear, it's quite a lot of it is towards that price range, which is ridiculous, really. Anyway, I find that quite a lot of money. And so for the Esther sweater, I got Peer Gynt, but also the Lamana mohair, which once again that made it very expensive. The Winter Soul sweater that I'm gonna knit, I've swatched for, that has hand dyed yarn in it for the color work. I mean, okay, it's all of this are projects that are going to be quite expensive. So I've got all the yarn in stash. I haven't even started knitting on them. So yeah, that's my goal for next year. Bad, very, very bad. Now we get to the bit that is sort of conclusion. I haven't frozen too often because it's sort of like little makeshift setup, so I can't check if it's freezing while I'm filming. So we'll see. But yeah, I have written down quite a lot of conclusions, but we're going to start with how much I spent in total this year. And hold on to your pants because it's ridiculous. In total, I spent €2,256.29. That is just a yarn. That's not even the needles, because I think I got an interchangeable set before this year. I think so. But I got quite a lot more cables and shorties and DPNs this year as well. So I've not even catalogued how much that is. At this point, I'm not sure I want to know. And then how much I've actually, out of all that yarn that I bought or that I had in stash and that I've knitted up this year. So I'm counting every skein that I've started using. So some garments are not finished, but I'm counting for those what yarn has already gone into them. That is €517.78. So that's not, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot. However, this is my very small little, only little plus side of this, and the rest is all bad things. But I only used like about 16% of the skeins that I bought. However, I knitted up 22.9% of what I bought because I knitted quite a bit out of stash. That's basically how I get those, I scrape those extra percents into there. Because when I started knitting, I bought quite a lot from Hobbii and I had no idea about how much yarn would go in the sweater. And I eyeballed sweaters, which resulted in things I will never wear. That's too bad. Later realized I twisted all my stitches, so something that would have been wearable I'm not finishing because I would have to keep on twisting every stitch and I don't want to. But yeah, I bought quite a lot of yarn back then, so that's 2024. And that's all in stash. Some of it I will use. Some of it I probably won't. So I have to think of something to do with that. Because it's useless just having it at home and not doing anything with it. So maybe I put it on Vinted. I don't know. Have you guys any experience with selling your yarn? That is, I mean, it's kind of new. It's just like a set quantity. So that's the only difference from buying it in the shop. But yeah, any experience with that and how that went? because that's something I'd like to. I don't want to throw it away, obviously. I would be open to giving some of it away, but some of it is like quite large quantities. I prefer to possibly sell it and then put that money on my savings account and not into buying more yarn. But yeah, getting back to all the yarn that I bought and that I didn't knit that much out of it. My first reaction when looking at all these charts, so when it's all in just the numbers in a spreadsheet, it's fine. I mean, it looks like a lot of yarn, but I mean, yeah, didn't do that much to me. Putting it into charts made me realize how bad it was. And my very first sort of big conclusion is no more yarn buying for the foreseeable future. I have enough yarn to knit, I think it's like 9 garments. I think it's 9. That's including the 2 that I want to finish from this year. But that is ridiculous. That is a lot of yarn, and that's not all of the yarn that I bought. There's more. There's like skeins for accessories, for scarves, for mittens, for hats, you name it. There's going to be quite a few leftovers, of course. There's some more yarn I got from the Knitting for Live Gaza not giveaway, donation thingy that they did. That I just bought several sweater quantities, thinking I'll knit this because this is a beautiful color, so I will do it anyway. So yeah, I have plenty. I'm not saying I'm not gonna buy any yarn next year, because I know myself, and buying yarn is also something that I enjoy. However, I think for the next like 6 months, I'm not really allowed. I have enough yarn to make sweaters, texture sweaters, colorwork sweaters. I have enough yarn in stash to make summer garments. I've got pure silk from Knitting for Life, cotton merino. I have enough for now. So yeah, that is my plan, is stop spending all this money on yarn for now. If when summer comes, I've knitted 4 sweaters and some accessories that were on my list, or used at least skeins from stash, and I come across a new pattern that is absolutely amazing and I don't have anything in stash that would work for it, then I'm allowed. Otherwise, I'm not. And I'm regretting this, because I would love to. I mean, I love hand dyed yarn, but maybe this should be the goal, because I would like to try and hand dye some yarn myself. It's not going to be as beautiful as the hand dyers that I love following on Instagram, and whenever I see what they make, for example, Tôt le Matin, I'd love to give her my money because it's beautiful. But if I'm not going to knit it, then it's just a nice skein in a box, and I shouldn't do that. But yeah, I would like and try hand dyeing yarn, just because I think it would be fun. However, I calculated, like, okay, I would need to get yarn and then colors, like the dyeing powders, and then all the stuff around it, and the pots, and that's quite expensive as well. But maybe if I don't buy any yarn until summer, maybe I can reward myself by getting like a sort of starter kit for dyeing yarn, and then I dye my own yarn for whatever project I want to do. That would be a good motivation. I sort of need a carrot. Sticks work very badly. Carrots, I love. So yeah, maybe that's what I will do. Then it's something to look forward to, and not just like a ban. I like this. One other thing that I learned, and that I didn't really expect, is I should not buy yarn because it's a sale. So the Knitting for Live was for like a good cause. sort of, I mean, technically that's the same thing, because I could have also chosen to just give that money straight to a charity. I didn't. But just buying yarn thinking, oh, it's for that project that I think I want to make in a couple months, but I'm already going to buy the yarn because it's cheaper now, ends up being lots and lots more yarn in my stash that I don't necessarily use straight away. I think it might be much better to wait until the moment where I'm ready to cast on or ready to swatch, order one ball, swatch, see if it works, whether or not I want to actually use that yarn. If I do, then order the sweater quantity and then start knitting on it straight away. If I don't want to start knitting on it straight away, just don't order the yarn. Then it's not going to sit in my stash. And then I'm not going to spend money. So that is my other thing that I'm like, okay, don't look at sales or discount codes or anything. It's going to be hard. But yeah, I'm going to try. And also in that same vein, don't order more yarn. By the way, the light, I mean, I wanted to film today so I would have daylight because we went skiing in the morning and all the light is gone now. It's dark outside, so I'm sorry, the lights probably changed massively during filming this. Anyway, what I want to say is also not buy extra yarn in order to get free shipping, because I will easily add like 20 euros of yarn to an order to get free shipping, whereas that's just going to be extra yarn in my stash. I have extra yarn in my stash because of that. And that is also something I want to stop doing. It's like, okay, I'll pay for the shipment then. But instead of lots of extra yarn that I might not use, some yarn that I got like that, I discovered that way. So it's not all bad. But that's not going to be the case every time. So the only way to do this in a way that would be good, and it's what I've done with my last two orders, is I would really like to knit the porcelain sweater at some point. I mean, it's a very popular pattern. I know everyone and their mother has knitted it, but it's one of the first patterns that I saw when I started knitting patterns, and I loved it for obvious reasons. But it was color work, and I did not dare to start with that at all. So it's taken me a while to get to a point where I'm like, okay, I would be comfortable knitting that now. And so what I've done is, if I hadn't gotten to the order amount for free shipping, I knew, okay, there's that I want to knit at some point. And so I've added that, like a part of the yarn quantity, because it's color work. I don't need to buy the entire sweater quantity of it. I can just buy part of the wool for one color, and then the next order some more wool for the other color, and then the mohair for one color in another order. And so I've spread it out a bit like that. Once again, bad excuse, but yeah, I might have done that. And then what I've done a bit this year is look at different yarns that I had seen online or other people use, and that was very inspired. I really wanted to try as well, and just order that and think, I'll find a pattern that's going to suit this. And I think I could be a bit more mindful of that. So I've tried quite a lot already this year, ordered stuff that I might not have knitted up, but now I've felt it, and so I'm going to be able to knit it next year. There's one more brand that I would like to try that I don't have, and that's Major Garn. But I'll just have to wait. I'm not going to get it until next year after, or like during the summer maybe, but we'll see. But I think being quite mindful about what you want to try, what is high on the list, like I really would like something in this yarn, is important, so that you look at patterns with that in the back of your mind. Oh, this would work for that yarn. Oh, this would not, and I don't have anything in stash, or I do have stuff in stash for this, so this would work. Or, I mean, maybe that's, yeah, something to keep in the back of my mind. I don't think that that is what should dictate what I'm going to knit, but since it's something I want to try, it's like important to realize, okay, what yarns do they have? What is the yarn that I want to try, and what pattern is that going to work for? And keep an eye out for that. And then, sort of like the last conclusion-ish thingy from this video is I'm going to keep on nerding with my knits. So I'm going to keep on keeping track of everything I buy and what I make and how long it takes me, etc. Because I found it very insightful, because lots of it I didn't realize. I could have known because I have all the information, well, sort of in my head or in my mailbox or wherever. But I didn't realize how much I spent. I mean, that was a bit of a shock when I realized how much it was. I don't want to spend that much on yarn. I find it ridiculous, and I find it obscene how little I've used out of that. So making it visible this way has really helped me making a decision for how I want to do this in the future. And when I discussed this with my husband, the first thing he said is, you should make a chart like this with what the horses are costing you. I am not doing that, because that is just going to be disgusting. I know they cost a lot. It's a choice. I don't want to know. I have at some point. I have done that when I bred Mushu, so my horse, and I kept a list of all the costs, so all the vet bills and everything associated with breeding your own horse. That's not fun. That is really not fun. And I think as long as it's something, you put money into something that you get a lot of joy out of, that's the first step. That's a good thing. Don't put it into something you don't really enjoy. Put it into something that really brings you joy and peace and happiness. But then also, we live in an age of consumerism, and I fall for it. I mean, 100%, obviously. And I want so much, but there's only so much time that I have. So making it visible really helps me to be more mindful about that. It's like, okay, what do I want to get out of knitting? I want the relaxation and excitement that it brings me when I'm knitting something, also the enjoyment when I'm wearing what I made, sort of being proud that I can do that. But I don't want to be a hoarder and have boxes and boxes of yarn that I'm not using, and I might end up not using, because this is also something that I've learned is when I started knitting, I would discover a new yarn and be like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. I'm gonna get enough to make like 3 jumpers out of this. And I would find something else that was better. And I would repeat the process. And so I have quite a few, ridiculous quantities of yarn that have sort of evolved through time. And yes, that is part of becoming a knitter and starting and discovering new things, but it's unnecessary, and I don't want to keep on doing that. And so yeah, that's sort of my lesson, is take things slower. I don't need to get the yarn straight away. There's no rush. I can wait until I'm ready. Then I can get it, and it's okay to spend money on a very nice yarn. There are limits, but it's okay to not get the cheapest option, to get something that is going to feel really nice when I knit it. But there's no need to get that much yarn in advance, because I'm going to keep on seeing new patterns and wanting to knit those new patterns. And if I have to force myself to knit those patterns that I loved a year ago, that is going to take away from the joy of knitting. So taking smaller steps, going slower, is eventually, I think, going to bring me more joy. Okay, that was my my conclusion, my words of wisdom for my year of knitting and buying for knitting. And I really wonder, I don't think I'm the only one doing this. I hope you guys won't be as bad. I'm sure some of you will, but it's okay to make mistakes in life. But when we do, we should learn from them. So, curious to hear from you. Are you like keeping track of everything you buy and you knit as well? And do you draw the same conclusions, or have you found ways of not falling into these pitfalls? Or how do you do this? Or have you accepted that knitting and buying yarn are two very separate hobbies and you're allowed to do both? I don't know. I'm very curious about how all of this is for you. So please let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to read those. Um, and then this sort of brings us to the end of this video. I hope I will have had time to edit this and post this in time. I'm going to spend all of Friday in a train. And if the internet is not very good, I'm not going to be able to upload it on time. So sorry if this one was posted later. But thank you so much for spending time with me, listening to me talk about my nerdy knitting numbers. And I will see you next week for just a knitting update. I will show you the finished Highland sweater, blocked and all. And so that one will be next week at 5 p.m. on Friday, as always. See you then, and in the meantime, enjoy your knitting. Bye bye.